The last time Emma Hayes drove down Willow Street, the sky was clear and ordinary. No one watching her small blue car would have guessed that in a few hours, police tape would flutter in that same driveway, or that two little faces would press against a neighbor's window, waiting for a mother who would never come home. But long before that awful morning, before sirens and questions and courtroom dates, there was just a girl who believed that love could fix anything. Emma grew up in a modest brick house on the edge of town, the kind of place where neighbors borrowed sugar and her mother left casseroles on doorsteps when someone got sick. Her parents, Mark and Linda, worked hard, he in a repair shop, she in a small bakery, and they raised Emma and her younger brother, Josh, on the idea that family was worth every sacrifice. Emma took that lesson to heart. She was the kind of teenager who helped her mom frost cupcakes at dawn and still made it to school smiling, her hair tied back, apron strings hanging out of her backpack. She dreamed of someday having a family of her own, weekend breakfasts, small birthdays, laughter echoing down a hallway that belonged to her. She met Ryan Carter at 19. He walked into the cafe where she worked, sunlight catching on the dark stubble along his jaw. He wore a worn leather jacket, carried a toolbox for a job down the street, and ordered a coffee he clearly couldn't afford to tip on. Emma noticed anyway. "Rough day?" she asked, sliding the cup toward him. He looked genuinely surprised that she cared. "You have no idea," he said, then smiled in a way that made her chest tighten. "Thanks. I'm Ryan." He came back the next day. And the next. Soon, he started timing his breaks to match her shifts, telling her stories about growing up in foster homes, never staying anywhere long, never having someone who stuck around. Emma listened with her whole heart. She saw the tired boy hiding under the confident grin. "I'm glad you're here now," she said once, cleaning the counter while he lingered. "No one's ever said that to me," he replied quietly. That sentence settled into her chest like a promise. Their early days felt like the life she'd always wanted. They took late-night walks under the yellow streetlights, splitting cheap takeout, planning futures that somehow fit together as if they'd been pre-drawn. He would finally have a home, she would finally have someone to love who needed her just as much. When Ryan lost a job, Emma picked up extra hours without complaint. When his car broke down, her dad helped him fix it. When he talked about his past, moving from place to place, never knowing when someone would decide they were tired of him, Emma squeezed his hand and said, "I'm not going anywhere." The first red flag was so small she almost missed it. One evening, she stayed late at the cafe to help a new coworker close. When she finally stepped outside, her phone buzzing with missed calls, Ryan's truck was parked right out front. He leaned against it, jaw clenched, eyes sharp in a way she didn't recognize. "Where were you?" he demanded as she approached. Emma blinked, taken aback by the anger in his voice. "I told you. I was training Megan on the register. We got busy. I'm sorry, I should have texted. I called you 6 times. His voice was low, tight. "You couldn't answer once?" Her cheeks flushed. A couple walking past glanced over. Emma forced a smile, trying to defuse the tension. "Ryan, it was just work. Come on, it's fine. I'm here now." He stared at her a moment longer, then exhaled and pulled her into a hug so sudden it made her stumble. "I just worry," he murmured into her hair. "I've lost too many people. I can't lose you, too." The words wrapped around her like a blanket and a rope at the same time. On the drive home, he kept a hand on her knee, as if reassuring himself she was really there. By the time they pulled into her parents' driveway, the argument felt almost silly in her mind. He loved her. That was all it was. That night, as she lay awake in her childhood bedroom, Emma replayed the scene outside the cafe. The sharpness in his eyes. The way his voice had changed. A small voice deep inside whispered, "That wasn't normal." But louder than that was another thought, "He's just scared of losing you. You can help him feel safe." And so, instead of pulling back, Emma stepped closer. At first, the changes were almost invisible. Emma didn't think of them as changes at all, she thought of them as growing together. That's what people did in serious relationships, right? They adjusted. They adapted. They made room for each other. Ryan started showing up at the cafe more often. Not to get coffee anymore, but to sit at a corner table and watch. He said he just liked being near her. Emma told herself it was sweet. When a male customer smiled too long, Ryan's jaw tightened. When a coworker laughed a little too loudly at her jokes, he made a comment about guys not knowing their place. Emma would laugh it off and squeeze his hand under the table, embarrassed but strangely flattered. He cared. He noticed. Little by little, her world got smaller. He didn't like when she stayed late with friends. Didn't like when she visited her best friend, Lily, without telling him first. Didn't like when she wore skirts that showed her knees or tops that he said sent the wrong message. You just don't see how other people look at you, he told her one night as she changed out of a summer dress. I'm trying to protect you. She looked at the dress hanging on the back of the chair. It was blue and soft and something she loved. Quietly, she folded it and pushed it to the back of her closet. They moved in together after less than a year. A small rented house at the edge of town with peeling paint and thin walls. Emma painted the kitchen a warm yellow to make it feel like a home. Ryan installed new locks. That should have scared her. Instead, she told herself he was being responsible. He made rules that weren't called rules. She should text when she left work. She should send a picture if she was running errands. She should keep her phone ringer on. She should answer when he called. It didn't come all at once. It came wrapped in concern and apologies and arms around her waist from behind while she cooked dinner. I just worry, he'd whisper. This world is messed up. I'm the only one who really has your back. Some nights, he was still the boy who had looked so surprised when she'd cared. He cooked pasta for her badly, boiling it too long, laughing at himself while she stirred the sauce. On those nights, she thought, see? He's trying. He loves me. This is what love is, work. But the tension began living in her body. She found herself listening for the sound of Ryan's truck in the driveway, adjusting her tone when she spoke, measuring the way she smiled, the pause before she answered, as if every movement could tilt the balance of the day. The first time he grabbed her arm, it happened so fast she wasn't sure it had really happened. They were arguing over something small, she couldn't even remember what later. Maybe dishes. Maybe a bill. Maybe nothing at all. She tried to walk past him down the hallway. His hand closed around her wrist. Don't walk away from me, he said. It didn't hurt. Not really. He let go quickly when he saw her eyes widen. For a split second, he looked as shocked as she felt. I'm sorry, he said at once, running his hands through his hair. I get scared when you shut down like that. Emma nodded, even though she felt shaky inside. She told herself it was a one-time thing. People lost control sometimes. He hadn't actually hurt her. That night, he held her closer than ever. He promised he'd do better. He said she was the only good thing in his life. And once again, Emma chose to believe him. A year later, she found out she was pregnant. She sat on the bathroom floor, back against the tub, staring at the small plastic stick in her trembling hands. 2 lines. Clear. Real. Terrifying. When she told Ryan, his face went blank for a moment. Then he pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. We're going to be a real family, he said. Nothing can break us now. For a while, things actually got better. He talked to her belly at night, resting his hand there gently. He built a small crib from old wood in the garage. He stopped yelling as much. He stopped punching walls. He stopped drinking for a while. Emma thought, this is it. This is what he needed. A reason. A future. But control doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. When their daughter, Sophie, was born, Emma felt a love so deep it frightened her. Tiny fingers, tiny breaths, a whole human depending on her. She promised herself she would give Sophie the life she'd always imagined. Ryan loved Sophie too. In his own intense way. He didn't like anyone else holding her. Didn't like Emma's mother visiting too often. Didn't like Lily coming by with gifts. "They're trying to get in your head," he said once, voice low, eyes shadowed. "They don't understand us." Emma started making excuses for why people couldn't visit. Too tired. Too busy. Baby sleeping. By the time she realized how far she drifted from everyone who loved her, she wasn't sure how to swim back. And that's when she started noticing it. Sophie jumping slightly when Ryan raised his voice. Sophie watching arguments with wide, silent eyes. Sophie clinging to her leg when things felt tense. Emma began to feel a fear that was different from the fear she felt for herself. It felt heavier. Colder. Sharper. And it whispered one terrifying thought in her mind. This isn't just about you anymore. The fear didn't arrive all at once. It settled in slowly, like dust on furniture, silent, steady, impossible to ignore once Emma finally noticed it. She started waking up earlier than Ryan, just to enjoy a few quiet minutes with Sophie in the soft morning light. Those quiet moments became her sanctuary. Sophie would rest her tiny head against Emma's shoulder while the coffee brewed, her little fingers gripping Emma's shirt like an anchor to safety. "That's my brave girl," Emma whispered one morning, more to herself than to the child. Ryan's mood started shifting faster. The calm didn't last as long. The apologies started sounding rehearsed. The gentle smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. It was never constant chaos. That's what made it confusing. It came in cycles. Good days. Tension. Anger. Tears. Promises. Over and over. Emma learned to spot the signs. Silence that was too heavy. Doors closing a bit too loudly. The way his shoulders stiffened when she spoke about her parents. He began checking her phone as a joke. He began criticizing how she dressed, to help. He began questioning every trip to the store. By the time she realized how much of herself she'd lost, she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Her smile looked smaller. Her eyes looked older. Her voice sounded quieter. One night, while rocking Sophie to sleep, Emma saw something in the baby's reflection in the dark window: fear. Not Emma's. Sophie's. Sophie's tiny eyebrows pulled together. Her body stiffened when Ryan's footsteps moved across the hallway. She wasn't old enough to understand words, but she understood tones. Energy. Danger. That night, Emma cried silently into a burp cloth. "I'm so sorry," she whispered into her daughter's hair. "I'm supposed to protect you." The realization unlocked something inside her. Fear shifted into something else. Resolve. She started saving small amounts of money. Nothing dramatic. Just spare change. $5 here. 10 there. She hid it deep inside an old winter boot in the back of the closet. She started reaching out to Lily again, carefully, slowly. Just checking in, she'd text. "Miss you. Can we talk?" Lily didn't ask questions. She just showed up when Emma needed her, like she always had. One afternoon, Emma brought Sophie to her mother's house alone. It felt like crossing a border. Her hands shook as she knocked on the familiar door. Linda pulled her into a hug so tight Emma almost broke. "You look tired," her mother said gently. Emma almost told her everything. Almost. But fear tightened in her throat. What if it made things worse? What if Ryan found out? Still, it was the first crack in the wall. The breaking point came quietly. Not with a scream. Not with a slam. With a bruise. Emma noticed it while changing her shirt one afternoon. A dark mark along her ribcage. She couldn't remember when it happened. Didn't remember pain. Just remembered being pushed back during an argument about nothing. That scared her more than 100 shouted words. She started planning in her head. Where could she go? How could she leave? What about Sophie? What about money? The idea of leaving felt impossible. But the idea of staying began to feel worse. The first time she told Ryan she was thinking about spending a few days with her parents, the change in him was instant. Why? He asked, voice flat. She could use some help with the baby, Emma said carefully. His eyes narrowed. You don't need help. I'm right here. I just thought. Don't. The word landed like a warning. That night, he cried for the first time in front of her in years. Actual tears. I can't lose you, he said. Everyone leaves. You promised you wouldn't. Emma held him while he cried. Her heart broke for him. And still, something inside her stayed awake. Watching. Waiting. A few weeks later, the tension exploded over something small, Sophie crying, a bottle spilled, a bill that hadn't been paid on time. Ryan slammed a cabinet door so hard it cracked. Stop acting like everything's my fault, he shouted. I never said that, Emma replied, her voice shaking. He stepped toward her too fast. Too close. Sophie started crying harder, as if she could feel danger thickening the air. That night, Emma made her decision. She would leave. Quietly. Carefully. Without telling him. She didn't know when. She didn't know how. She only knew one thing with absolute clarity. If she stayed, something worse than fear was coming. Emma didn't leave all at once. She started with the smallest steps possible, the kind that wouldn't draw attention. She kept a bag hidden at the back of the hall closet, tucked behind winter coats. Inside it, she slowly added things: a spare shirt for Sophie, a tiny sweater, copies of birth papers, a toothbrush, the small envelope of cash from the old boot. She lived in two worlds at the same time. One world where she cooked dinner, folded laundry, smiled through tense afternoons. Another world where she counted exits, kept her phone charged, studied the quiet rhythms of the house like a map. She chose her words more carefully than ever. She learned how to calm storms before they fully rose: softer voice, slower movements, fewer questions. And still, Ryan felt her shifting away. You've been distant, he said one night, watching her from the couch while she fed Sophie. I'm just tired, she replied. He stood and crossed the room, resting a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't kind. It was claiming. You wouldn't leave me, right? Her heart raced. Of course not. The lie tasted bitter. Her chance came on a Tuesday afternoon. Ryan had taken a temporary job 2 towns over. Long hours. Late returns. Emma watched his truck disappear down the street with a strange mix of fear and relief. She didn't pack everything. Just the bag. Just Sophie. Just enough. Her hands shook as she buckled Sophie into the car seat. She expected the front door to burst open. Expected tires to appear in the driveway. Expected shouting. None of it happened. She drove straight to her parents' house, barely breathing the whole way. Her mother opened the door and understood everything without Emma saying a word. That night, Emma slept in her old childhood bedroom with Sophie beside her. It should have felt safe. Instead, she felt hunted. Ryan called. Then called again. Then again. She didn't answer. By morning, the messages had turned from confused to angry to pleading. You took my child. You can't do this. I'll change. I swear. Emma blocked the number with shaking fingers. The police station smelled like disinfectant and old carpet. Emma sat in a plastic chair, Sophie asleep in a stroller beside her. Her heart pounded so loudly she barely heard her own voice as she described everything, the control, the shouting, the fear that never left. The officer was kind. Calm. Focused. You're doing the right thing, he said. A temporary order of protection was put in place. Emma was given papers and instructions and a small sense of safety she'd forgotten was possible. But fear doesn't disappear with paperwork. 2 weeks later, Ryan found her. He parked across the street from her parents' house. He didn't get out of the truck. He just sat there. Watching. Waiting. Emma called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. He didn't do anything, Linda said softly that night. Maybe it scared him enough. Emma wanted to believe that. Over the next month, the tension shifted again, not loud anymore, just heavy. Like a storm that never quite arrives. Ryan started sending emails instead of calling. Long ones. Soft ones. Careful ones. I'm getting help. I'm going to meetings. I understand what I did wrong. I just want to be part of Sophie's life. Emma's resolve began to crack. He never wrote anything threatening anymore. Never raised his voice. Never demanded. He sounded like the man she met long ago. The damaged boy who just wanted to feel safe. Her lawyer warned her. Her parents warned her. Lily warned her. But Emma's heart felt pulled in two directions. She agreed to supervised visits. Then short unsupervised visits. They met in parking lots. At parks. Outside coffee shops. At first, he behaved perfectly. Calm. Polite. Smiling. You look good, he'd say. Sophie's grown so much. You're doing a great job. Over time, the patience thinned. She should stay with me longer. You're overreacting. They turned you against me. Emma felt it again, that familiar shift in the air. And yet, when Ryan asked if she could bring Sophie over one afternoon so he could spend real time with her, Emma hesitated. I just want to keep things peaceful, he said quietly. I don't want to fight anymore. Emma nodded slowly. I just want peace too, she agreed. The morning Emma agreed to meet Ryan alone, the air felt strangely still. No wind. No birdsong. Just quiet that sat heavy on her skin. She dressed Sophie in her favorite small yellow sweater, the one with tiny stitched flowers. Sophie giggled as Emma brushed her soft hair, completely unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their world. You'll see Daddy for a little bit, Emma said, trying to make her voice sound normal. Then we'll come right back, okay? Sophie clapped her hands. She didn't understand the history. She only understood faces and voices and love in the simplest form. Emma drove to the small house Ryan had been staying in, a quiet rental at the edge of town. She kept the engine running. Just in case. Ryan was already outside, leaning against the fence. His smile looked right. His voice sounded calm. You came, he said. Just for a little while, Emma answered. He stepped closer to Sophie, crouching down. Hey, sweetheart. For a few minutes, it felt normal. Laughing. Talking. Sophie's tiny hands on the fence. The sunlight on the driveway. Emma started to relax. That was the worst part. Then Ryan asked quietly, Can I talk to you for a second? Alone? Her instincts screamed no. Her exhaustion said yes. "I'll be right here," she said, pointing to Sophie. They walked a few steps away, just far enough that Sophie couldn't hear. Ryan's face changed. Not dramatically. Slowly. Like calm water freezing. "You called the police on me," he said. "I was scared," Emma replied carefully. "You made me look like a monster. I never wanted that." Silence stretched. "What are you really doing here, Emma?" he asked. She swallowed. "Trying to make things peaceful." For a heartbeat, he just looked at her. Then he stepped back, breathing hard. His hands clenched. Then unclenched. "You're not taking her away from me," he said quietly. Her heart hammered. "I'm not." But he wasn't listening anymore. It happened quickly. A loud sound. Someone shouting. Emma turning instinctively back toward Sophie. In that small, terrifying moment, no one around them had time to understand what was happening. Neighbors would later say they heard raised voices. A sudden noise. A scream. But all Emma knew was one terrible truth. She would not make it back to her car. Sophie was safely pulled back from the fence by a neighbor who heard the commotion. The little yellow sweater was the last bright thing Emma saw as the world tilted and went dark. The house fell silent. The yard fell silent. Ryan was gone before help arrived. Sirens cut through the quiet too late. Red and blue lights reflected off empty windows and shaking tree branches. Emma's parents were told at the police station, sitting side by side in hard chairs, hands clasped so tightly their knuckles turned white. "He ran," the officer said gently. Sophie slept through the night in a borrowed crib at her grandparents' house, clutching her small stuffed rabbit, unaware that her world had changed forever. By morning, Emma's face was everywhere. Smiling photos. Graduation pictures. Birthday snapshots. A mother holding her child in sunlight. Ryan's truck was found abandoned near the highway. The search began. The search didn't end in a day. Or a week. It stretched on like a wound that wouldn't close. Patrol cars moved through quiet streets. Tips poured in. Sightings were reported that led nowhere. Every rusted pickup on the highway looked like it might be Ryan's. Every knock on the door made Emma's parents flinch. Linda slept on the floor beside Sophie's crib. Mark stopped going to work. The house felt hollow without Emma's laugh, her footsteps, her voice calling out, "Mom, I'm home." 3 weeks later, a gas station clerk 2 states away recognized Ryan from a news broadcast. He looked thinner. Tired. Unshaven. Like a man carrying more weight than his body could hold. The clerk waited until he left, then quietly called the tip line. Police found him in a cheap motel room that night. He didn't resist. He didn't run again. He just sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I didn't mean for it to happen." The trial came a year later. The courtroom felt too small for the grief inside it. There were no dramatic outbursts. No shouting. Just quiet tension and tears. Photos of Emma sat on the prosecution's table, smiling, holding Sophie, stained with fingerprints from people who kept picking them up and setting them down again. Witnesses spoke about what they had seen. The raised voices. The sudden change in the air. Emma's mother testified with shaking hands. Her best friend spoke through sobs. Even the neighbor who pulled Sophie to safety couldn't finish a sentence without stopping. When Ryan took the stand, he talked about fear. Loneliness. Loss. But none of it changed what had been taken. The verdict came on a quiet afternoon. Guilty. The judge's voice was steady as the sentence was read. Years that would stretch longer than the life he had shattered. Ryan didn't look at the gallery. He stared at the floor. Emma's parents held Sophie between them as they left the courtroom. She was older now. Taller. Quiet. She didn't fully understand the words being said around her, but she felt the weight of them. In the years that followed, the world moved on. But Emma's name didn't disappear. A small playground was built in her memory. A bench by a walking trail was engraved with her favorite saying, "Love should never hurt." Workshops were held in community centers, teaching people to recognize warning signs. To speak up. To step in. Linda began volunteering at a center for families in difficult homes. She told her daughter's story gently, without anger, only truth. Mark learned how to braid Sophie's hair. Learned how to pack lunches with little notes inside. Learned how to be soft in a world that had hardened him. Sophie grew up surrounded by love. Not the perfect storybook kind, but the strong, steady kind. The kind that listens. The kind that protects. Sometimes, at night, she would ask about her mother. Was she funny? Was she brave? Did she love me? The answers were always the same. Yes. Yes. Always yes. Emma's story didn't end the day her life was taken. It lived on in the people who loved her. In the children who learned to speak up. In the quiet strength of a little girl who grew up knowing that her mother's love was bigger than any darkness. And in the reminder, still whispered in houses and hearts everywhere. Real love does not control. Real love does not threaten. Real love never asks you to sacrifice your safety to save someone else. Emma's light didn't vanish. It became a warning. A lesson. And, for many, a way out.